Good afternoon. I do realize some of you got in town maybe earlier today, and for some, this time could be also quite late in your local time zone. But where I come from, when you say good afternoon, people do respond. So I'm going to try that again. Good afternoon. More like it. At least I can tell people are alive and paying attention. Thank you. Thank you for choosing to attend this session. It's an important conversation that we are going to be having. I realize the organizers schedule us to be the last session amongst others. So it looks like they saved the best for last, and you're in the exact best of all the others that are happening right now. So glad that you could join. We're looking forward to hearing from the panelists on an important topic. We'll be looking at the implications of processing and production of minerals critical in Africa for the energy transition, and how we can be able to reduce on the global volume of these minerals, and in the process also enabling decarbonization of global supply chains, a key aspect of what we need to see happen if we're ever going to get to net zero by 2050. And for a lot of African countries, this is also an important aspect of what will help in driving their own economic growth, creating jobs, and also bringing in local manufacturing. So the onshoring of processing and production of these minerals is a critical aspect of this, and it has a lot of linkages to circular economy and the principles thereof. And I am so happy because you'll be hearing from some esteemed panelists about this in this conversation, in their own experiences and the work that they are doing. And to get us started, we'll be hearing a keynote address from Mr. Kgauta Mokoena. You don't know how many times I've practiced that. Mr. Kgauta Mokoena is the Chief Director, Department of Environmental Affairs in South Africa, the Department of Environment, Forestry, Fisheries, and he'll be coming to share his own experiences and the work that they're doing in South Africa in the context of does location matter for the green transition? I'm not going to ask you to respond to that, but I hope by the end of the session, we can have an answer, definitive answer. Does location matter when it comes to the green transition? So without further ado, I'll invite Mr. Mokoena to come in and give his keynote address. Welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Program Director. It's Kgauta Mokoena, as indicated, from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment in South Africa. Very interesting topic, and also very key to the environment space, and looking at opportunities that are there for us, largely because when you look at circular economy and resource efficiency, the two goes together. But when you look at circular economy and extractive industry, then you start to think that there might be no relations there because it's separate processes. But the reality is that the two also comes together in this way. In 2011, when we were preparing for the climate change COP17 that was held in Durban, hence with the Durban outcomes, we were challenged to say from the mining sector what contribution we can make in terms of greening, what contribution we can make in terms of transitioning to low carbon, because in terms of our national development plan, which we call an NDP, is a long-term plan, Project 2030, where prior to about 10 years ago, we developed the NDP with one of the key aspirations, which is transitioning to a low carbon and climate resilient communities. And hence a very important aspect of looking at involvement of our communities, but also the impact of climate change. Hence the NDP and the work in the policy space that we're doing is geared towards assisting us to achieve that transition. And it's history to say recently we have a number of initiatives that are mining related and extractive industry related that showcase what opportunities and best practices that can be achieved through mining related activities. The recent introduction of extended producer responsibility scheme that is looking at electronic waste, and at the same time the lighting is part of the interventions and initiatives that at government level has been introduced to say maybe we shouldn't depend that much and solely on extracting material from underground. You'll be familiar with the say that there is more gold in 1 ton of electronic waste as opposed to 1 ton of gold ore, which is where we get the gold from. So if you look at that scenario where from 1 ton of waste you have more, or 1 ton of e-waste you have more gold than from gold ore, it really says there is opportunities for mining and extractive industry to start thinking and looking at how waste is managed, but also our contribution generally to sustainable development, because key is the issue of sustainable development. So hence, when you look at our national climate change bill, it had, or it has, for instance, a key for effective climate change response, long-term and just transition to a low-carbon and climate resilient community or economy, as I've indicated earlier on, but also the context of sustainable development becomes quite key, and also ensuring that there is role that we play from all sectors in the implementation of the National Development Plan of South Africa, as well as in our respective sector initiative. I mentioned the example of e-waste. What we did before the introduction of the extended producer responsibility is introducing economic instruments that are internalizing the externalities when it comes to electronic waste, where we said for energy efficiency, let's introduce what is called incandescent light bulb levy to start creating awareness about the need for change from the historical energy intense systems and instruments to much more energy efficient systems and equipment that we now utilizing. It's history to say now we're talking for IR, which again, it depends on this gold, it depends on, among others, these materials that we are extracting from underground, and through sustainable development and sustainable development policies and legislation, we are able to look at how we can change the situation such that we no longer always and solely depend on having to extract the material, but there is ways in which we can keep the material that has been extracted already as long as possible in the value chain and for circularity. So key in the waste sector for this contribution is the issue of material recovery. You can't just get 1 ton of electronic waste. There has to be material collection that will be taking place. Hence the aspect of localization, because you can only get to that stage through involvement of collection mechanism, be it local authorities involved or be it small, medium enterprises involved in the collection of those material. But key for us in South Africa, linked to our priorities of economic growth and job creation, is the involvement of the informal sector, where we have about 60,000 informal sectors that participate in waste collection or in extended producer responsibility scheme or in material recovery. So hence this issue of material recovery being key, depending on where you are and whether you are in the EPR scheme or outside, it becomes critical for material that will be alternative to that which you can extract from underground, and also looking at national and local circumstances for a process where those materials are extracted. We have also developed the National Climate Change Bill, Climate Response Strategy, the 2020 National Waste Management Strategy, which has in it the circular economy principle as one of the key principles. And in the rolling out of the National Waste Management Strategy, we have 3 pillars. One pillar is waste minimization, where we look at the rollout of initiatives that are waste to energy related, or we call them waste flagship projects, because they are happening at local government level, at municipality level, where initiatives on waste to energy are realized because of the involvement of municipalities in these initiatives and in the implementation of this pillar on waste minimization, and also on the waste flagship project, where we're saying there are various ways to make use of waste that is collected, and some of it is waste to energy. Recently, we have conducted a huge stakeholder consultation session. We call it a workshop or indaba that had circular economy and waste to energy as the theme, and also indicating the link on these two. Contrasting topics again, because usually and ordinarily when you think circular economy, you think the waste hierarchy, and you'll have the top of the hierarchy at the bottom. I think the second last part is the waste to energy part before landfilling. But we are saying there is realization that depending on national circumstances, the involvement of municipalities, for instance, there is a potential for municipalities to generate their own electricity through waste-related initiative. For instance, the waste flagship project that I've mentioned. One of our cities, the city of Johannesburg, has a project on waste to energy where they're generating electricity from landfill gas. There are projects also on biogas that are being implemented as also a way of saying it's good to have at global level agreements and treaties, as we are doing with the COPs. But again, in order to realize our commitments on our NDCs, there has to be this localization, there has to be involvement of local communities and regional approaches, which are assisting in complementing different initiatives. Because again, with localization alone in an environment where there might be resources resource constraints or challenges, it then doesn't assist, but you find that neighboring countries or municipalities or provinces or regions, they are able to complement each other if there is a way of pulling resources together as opposed to working in silos. So working together in these initiatives proves to be quite key. This is for authorities and project owners who are involved, but also strategic partners who will come in maybe through technological know-how, other capacity, forms of capacity, resources or finance that will also be critical in implementing these projects, become very important because our experience shows that in order to realize success in the implementation of projects related to waste management or achieving our commitments to transitioning to low carbon economy, we need to work together. It cannot be only certain parties that are involved and implementing their own initiatives in silos apart from working together. So critical importance, policy direction is very important for any area that is working and looking at transitioning to a circular economy. Waste to energy initiatives are some of the initiatives that have been tested that involves the informal sector among other role players. Also, depending on where you are, initiatives such as solar, we're implementing quite a lot in South Africa because of the opportunities that are there. And at the same time, there is, however, a challenge of what to do with the waste from there. We hope that with more research on alternatives, we will be able to find solutions on what to do with the solar panels once they have reached their end of life. The change in behavior as well, because I've spoken about materials. They involve communities. They involve households. When you talk separation at source, you talk and you need, and you cannot do without involving households. Hence, the need for involvement of municipalities, but also going beyond creating form of awareness and a sense of responsibility among residents to say, for a collective response, we all need to play a role. And this is shown to be playing very critical role for us and for any transitioning initiatives to be developmental, transformational, empowering, participatory, because they involve the locals, transformational because they trigger changes in certain status quo that will probably be there for some time, and empowering when we look at the potential for small, medium enterprises that can be developed from participating in waste collection. Evidence and science-based, because it's initiatives that cannot happen without science. It's initiatives that cannot happen without innovation and the support for alignment. And cost, unfortunately, remains an issue when we talk these projects, because there might not be investment, and somehow we need to think about the funding mechanism for transitioning to low carbon and climate resilient societies. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mokoena, and I apologize to rush you towards the end, as was looking to make sure we can be able to benefit from the various voices that will be represented in this conversation. And I think it's heartening to hear a lot of the work that South Africa is doing in terms of applying a lot of the circular economy principles, minimizing waste, recycling, also making sure that you're reducing on the strain on natural resources. And I think the emphasis on we can still achieve energy transition without overexploitation of limited resources, doing better with less. And I just want to quickly set the scene before I invite the panel on and allow that as we get into this conversation, we can help with the framing of some of this. I think a lot of times, and if you could just bring up my presentation, a lot of times what you find is that the topic of energy transition, when that is raised, it can evoke, I think what it can evoke sometimes is a concentration on where we know the industrial locations today to be. How do we enable that we can retrofit those industries, enable it for us to transition? So thinking about the current manufacturing capacities, the current manufacturing hubs, how do we enable them to transition? What we'll be discussing is providing a perspective in terms of, is there a broader perspective in coming to this conversation that allows that we can be more optimal in leveraging resources globally and opportunities globally that not only are cost effective, but also allow that we can be able to do more with less, or we can be able to optimally use the mineral resources that we have. And so what you see on the screen is essentially, as we think about the demand for lithium batteries going into 2030, we'll be approximating in excess of 1,500 Empire State Buildings in terms of the size of the demand that is likely to grow in the next few years. 2030 is not that far off. The renewable energy, the transition that we are talking about happening, essentially will be fueled by minerals. And these minerals obviously are finite, but the demand will keep growing between now and then. So it becomes very important for us that if we can be able to mitigate how much demand we place in terms of the minerals needed, if there is locations that allow us to be able to use less, but still remain optimal in the outputs that we're generating, that is the interest that we are focusing on. Now, 20% of the 1,500 Empire State Buildings, or the 600,000 kilotons that is required of lithium batteries, 20% of that we know will be used for grids and industries. So about 120,000 kilotons that will be needed for grid and industries. Now, this is where the African continent, just given its own comparative and competitive advantages, when you think about 40% of the global renewable energy resource is available, or potential is available within the continent, and 60% of global solar is available within the continent. 40% of the critical minerals are also found within Africa, and by 2040, 40% of the global workforce. So what does this mean? How do we leverage these levers that allow that a part of the world that has lagged behind to date can be leveraged for the energy transition? And this is where we start thinking around some of the sustainable approaches that we should be factoring in, from reducing demand for power storage and looking at increasing recycling, obviously, opportunities for a lot of these critical minerals. And just to give you an example of what that could potentially look like, this graph essentially illustrates how solar energy output in a part of the continent compared to a current industry location, Germany in this case, compares in terms of the quality of the production and the output with similar plants, solar plants. And you think about the installation, the graph that you see on there, the consistency in Africa, where from January to December, the variation is so limited because we know we don't have, thankfully, the kind of schizophrenic weather that you'll find sometimes, and I'm not going to name any names. We have the benefit of consistency in terms of insulation, radiation, in a way that can be tapped to enable that we can reduce on the global volume of minerals needed, because for the same output, for the same production in Germany, vis-a-vis allocation, I believe in this instance in Kenya, you will need twice the battery storage in Germany as you will need in Kenya. In other words, you will need fewer minerals in Kenya for the same plant, for storage, for battery storage, as you would need in Germany. What that really leads you to believe is that Africa essentially can be a green industrial hub, and not just because of the economic feasibility of it, but also from a circularity standpoint, you'll be able to minimize on the amount of minerals that will be needed for that. And this is just to illustrate what that potential saving potentially could look like, because if you were reducing saving in terms of that demand, then the translation of that is almost 5,000 Olympic swimming pools, in terms of the minerals that would be needed. And ultimately, as you also think about optimizing, the recycling aspects of this are equally important, because you can be able to extract more value. We know, for instance, 100% of copper can be recycled indefinitely. And I think it's something that we should be aiming to achieve. We're right now doing about 30% of that. There is opportunities with steel as well. So it's combining various aspects of circular economy into a green transition, into an energy transition, and enabling that we are being thoughtful about optimizing on where this potentially could be anchored. So that is just by way of background. I want you to hear from other folks that we have in the room who have perspectives that will help in enriching this conversation. And I want to invite to the stage now my panelists, starting off with Davinah Milenge. Davinah Milenge from African Development Bank. Davinah, please come to the stage. Yeah, give them a round of applause as they join. And then Eddy Kioni. Eddy is the CEO of Buenassa Critical Minerals out of the DRC. Welcome, Eddy. And last but not least, Elisa Tonda, who is the Chief Resources and Markets Branch at the UNEP. Yeah, I'll join you on there, yes. I know we don't have a lot of time, but we'll try and cover as much ground as possible. And I do want to start with you, Elisa, because you're with UNEP, and we know that UNEP has placed a huge priority on the circular economy with a focus on minerals and metals. And if you could just share some of the findings, if there is any numbers that would enable us to just see what this translates into and why you particularly have made this a priority, and finding that there's more impact that could be generated from this. Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me here for this extremely interesting conversation. And you're absolutely right in saying that in the focus of our organization, minerals and metal play a very strategic role. Maybe I just do one step back and let you see how we are coming there. The core of the strategy that UNEP has currently is very much focused around addressing the challenges that we're confronted with due to climate change, due to nature and biodiversity loss, due to growing pollution and increasing waste production. So it is very logical that the minerals and metal sector actually play an extremely central role in that conversation. and central, but we need to be clear of the trade-offs we are playing when looking at the future of this sector and at the growth and pace of our reliance on minerals and metals. We are very clear, and you mentioned that as well in the intervention, that the geographic element is extremely important, and the very narrow geographic focus of extractive activities and the impact of local communities is very, very central, has to be very, very central to our conversations. We're talking about overall, you put on the slides few minerals and metals specifically and their growth trajectory, but we're actually talking of over 3 billion tons of minerals and metals needed to keep us within 1.5 degree in our climate trajectories. And we're also aware that 50% of the global copper and lithium production is in an area with high water stress. We're also very clear that minerals mining could impact at least on 7% of global deforestation. And we know that 54% of prospective energy transition minerals extraction would happen in areas on or near land owned by indigenous peoples. Let me add a further element that speaks to waste. Obviously, a number of us may have seen very, very clear visual that speak to the size of the mining site and the size in comparison with that of the resource that actually enter the economy from mining site. And in the context of one of our consultation with government experts and other stakeholders, it actually became very apparent some of the striking figures around the relationship between resources that are emerging from mining and the waste that is generated, that I feel is particularly central, a conversation around circularity. So every year we mine more than 115 billion tons of rock to produce 63 billion tons of mineral products, 72 billions of waste rock, and 13 billions of tons of mine tailing waste. And we also know the criticality that it has for local communities that are around it. So the reason why it's so central to our strategy is that we actually have a very narrow window of opportunity to make sure that the extraction of minerals and metals and all the value chain around it is actually going to contribute to the sustainable development of resource-rich countries, for which some of the figures that I also want to put on the table just to give us a sense of which countries we are talking about. So for this country, for countries where mining plays a dominant role in the economy, these accounts to a quarter of their GDP, half of the world population, and nearly 70% of those living in extreme poverty. So it's definitely critical that we design our trajectory of taking advantage of this growth in demand of minerals and metals in such a way that it benefits communities. And this has definitely been at the center of the conversation that happened even very recently in the UN Environment Assembly that gathered a couple of months back in Nairobi, Kenya, but has also been very much central to the interest of the Secretary General of the United Nations, that has placed these at the core of his agenda and has announced at the last COP an initiative, a panel of eminent people very much focused on the conversation that we're having now, how we take advantage in a way that is in the interest of the communities and of the countries of these reliance on minerals and metals.
Thank you, Elisa. And I'll just pick up from where you left off because Eddy you're on the front lines of a lot of this. You're working in one of these mineral resource countries, and you have experiences that most of us in this room do not have in terms of, Elisa talks about ensuring these benefits to the communities, ensuring that this can be beneficial for these countries. Could you speak around how Buenassa, you're thinking around these opportunities, the translation of these opportunities in a way that is not just extractive, but countries can be able to see the value of this and communities ultimately being able to benefit? And what would make it even more attractive? What is it that we are not doing that we should be doing? If you could speak a little bit more about that.
Thank you very much, Jack. First of all, thanks for having me here. I'm really humble. I think when it comes to discussions about or around critical minerals and the impact on local community and on the most of the, as we call them, country producing, or let's say producing country, critical mineral producing country, I think we have to agree, first of all, on the ultimate aim of what we're doing. Because at the end of the day, there is only one planet. The energy transitions cannot be a matter of a global north against the global south. It's definitely a collaboration between all of us. And most of the time, we tend to oppose the two concepts. But as I always say, it's maybe just a matter of proportions, but every part of the world is, in some way, critical minerals producer, and in other way, critical minerals consumer. We have to agree on that first. And secondly, we have to find a common understanding of how do we see our pattern of consumptions evolving over the years. Because the circular economy concept is not new, in fact. Even if it took its momentum since the early 80s and continue to gain momentum and attract attentions, at the end of the day, it's how do we want to make sure that our development pattern is sustainable. And in that regard, I can only take the example of the DRC. I'm from the DRC. We are developing a project which aims to refine copper and cobalt, which obviously is a byproduct of copper, with the aim to make sure that the DRC can capture as much value as possible locally, which is not typically a Congolese problem. It's a problem that you face in most of the developing countries, actually. And it's a vision that is becoming now a project that requires involvement of everyone, in matter of fact, because we have to build an environment that will be conducive in terms of business, which will allow technology to be used in an efficient way, because refinery exists since a long time, but they're very pollutive most of the time. It's like mining. Sometimes putting mining and environmental matter together can become tricky. But with the new technology that are putting in place, that are being applied, there is an opportunity for countries like the DRC or other part of the continent to entering into an industrialization process that will help them to gain some competitive advantage. And that's what we're working on currently. Another point, my colleague panelist mentioned the geographic aspect to be taken into considerations. I will go a step further. We talk about geostrategic components. In fact, we aim through our project to make sure that the supply to critical minerals for the different parts of the world can be as just and equitable as possible, so that we can produce raw material, we can produce critical minerals for the DRC, for the region. We can make sure that an industrialization process can take place in the continent in order to boost a local market, and at the same time giving a fair response to the other part of the world. Because most of the time we'll see in the news, in all the discussion about critical minerals, the global north tend to be focused more on how to secure critical minerals for their industry. Seldom how to make sure that those critical minerals benefit really to the global south. That where we hope that together, global south and north, we can change the narrative and make things better.
Fascinating. Yes, please. It's very encouraging to hear, somebody obviously at the forefront of shifting some of these dynamics, enabling that what has been happening in the past, we don't sustain some of those practices that have been exploitative in nature. We can be able to see more value addition and the benefits flowing. And that's kind of where, Davinah, I want to come in. You represent a capital allocator in the Africa Development Bank. And you hear somebody like Eddy and the vision and the aspiration. And I know he didn't mention this, but ultimately, without the capital to enable this to happen, that becomes a barrier. Speak a little bit more into the capital flows for these kind of opportunities, and then connecting that to circular economy principles, enabling that there can be even a higher business attractiveness to a lot of these projects.
Right, thanks, Jack and Eddy and Elisa. I think this is very inspiring to speak to this and really speaking about what we have on the continent, the opportunities, the challenges. And I think you articulated it very well, that where you have the critical minerals is actually where you have water distress, the most vulnerable populations, very fragile societies. In the back, we have what we call the Africa Development Fund, which is a fund for low-income countries. And if you look at the number of countries that are really rich in these resources, the bulk of them fall in that category. You look at the index for the most climate vulnerable countries, 9 of them most resource rich. And so that paradox is something that I think we need to really define and tackle. I like what you said, that ultimately the change will be in understanding that the people that live with that resource have to benefit. It's only fair, it's only just that that gets to happen. Now, oftentimes it's always the issue, there's no finance. But when you attend, well, maybe this is not a funding conference, but if you go to COP, there's billions and trillions that are announced every day of the COP. UAE announced a 30 billion climate fund with BlackRock. Oh, Africa would benefit. The GCF, the Green Climate Fund, went away with 12 billion in replenishment. Oh, 50% is supposed to go to developing countries. We, the multilateral development banks, announce our climate finance every year. 2022 was 60 billion. Now, I think Eddy will be like, okay.
Where's the 60 billion?
Exactly. And that's the frustrating bit. Where I sit every day, we receive, because we even have this very small fund, but every day it is, okay, I know that you have a circular economy facility, please, I'm doing this and this and this. Okay, we actually not funding. And those are very frustrating elements because the financial architecture is still very traditional. You just don't walk into a bank and get resources. At most, you have to collect the guarantees. It's like me trying to get a Schengen visa. You go with your grandmother's land titles and all that kind of thing.
And all your ancestors.
Yeah, and that's extremely resource inefficient. In fact, it's not anything efficient at all. So what we have to do, there has been conversation around changing the architecture of how the financial architecture is designed at the moment to bring resources. I mean, we talk of billions, those Empire State Buildings, the multiples you mentioned, they are real. The resource is there, the capital is there. But I think there's a whole lot of timidness in getting out of the traditional way. We all get back to our desk, and it's like, okay, how do I profile risk? Oh, you need this and this. If you don't have it, I won't look at you. We waste a lot of opportunities. And I'm not sure that we are making enough effort to not be talking, having this conversation in 2050. When we are not supposed to be having AirCop in 2050, we should have had solutions. But it's unlikely that his kind of a startup is being center stage. What is being center stage is, oh, there's critical minerals, but we leave it there. So there has to be mechanisms that we understand what are these and how do you fund them. So what we've done at the African Development Bank is to try and create, we call them marketplace, deal marketplace. And so we have an investment forum every year to kind of bring your startups with the financiers. Now, of course, being the resident multilateral development bank, there's a confidence there that the G funds, the Fortune 500 companies have a bit of confidence if they're talking to the African Development Bank, if we can come with you on the table. And so we've been trying to get those kind of financing instruments. You might have heard of what is called the Green Infrastructure, Africa Green Infrastructure Facility. What that is a joint FDB, African Union, Africa 50. It is a 10 billion arrangement to green Africa's infrastructure. It is a financing vehicle to kind of understand what he's dealing with, his level, the next level, or the level below him, to create that transformation. And I wish we could get many of those vehicles on the table. So if you look at the economic structure of the African countries, you have big innovative base that nobody's funding, that really lack the capital, and it's not a lot of resources that they need. They are not looking at the 60 billion that we announced. They're just looking at funds that get them to the next level. It is $10,000, it's the next level, it is, I don't know, in millions. But that base is critical for that transformation. If we are not making that transformation, it becomes difficult. So I think if we could all go back to our homework to say, how do I meet Eddy? And in every COP we say, oh, we met 5 Eddies and scale it up. That would make more sense than every time we put a report that says 60 billion and we are reaching the 100 billion and we are missing a little bit. More critical examples could happen. And I think we have them. It's just the confidence of laying them out and understanding them and understanding how the structuring happens. Thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Davinah. Yes. Yeah, it does sound like we need to move beyond declarations, announcements, into a point where this can translate into real, tangible projects in a way that in these kind of conversations we're coming to point at, look what Eddy has done, look at another entity out there, what they're doing. And I feel that enables the confidence that we need to even crowd in a lot more than even 60 billion. But a lot of these pieces do need to come together. I want, in the interest of making sure the audience is also in part of this conversation, I want to open it up in case there's anybody in the audience with a question. If there's a question that any of what you have heard or you're hearing has triggered, please feel free. I am just looking around. Whichever hand goes up. Oh, okay, multiple hands. So I just follow from that end, moving to my left. I don't know if there's somebody with a mic. There's a gentleman on that end with his hand up. Feel free to direct your question at anyone.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Boni Mbithi. I'm the CEO for the WE Center, which is an e-waste management company in Kenya. Now, I'm just curious, if you look at the amount of e-waste that was generated globally in 2022 is about 62 billion kgs. And out of the 62 billion, about I think 28 billion is precious metals. Now, if you look at, again, the amount of money we are putting into mining, for example, now in Congo, and I was just reading an article of how much women and children are hired and paid less than $2 a day in those mining sites. Why are we not putting investments in ensuring that we can also do proper urban mining from the 28 billion kilograms of metals that have been dumped? So are we losing the point when you are saying, let's focus on going to mining, let's get to the cobalt, let's get the lithium, let's get the gold, but again, we are dumping more than 28 billion kilograms of those metals. So I just wanted to understand the perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, I realize you didn't direct that at anybody, so I'll just allocate the questions. So, Elisa, if you don't mind taking that one. So how do we enable that, there is a recycling component to this from existing waste? There's a gentleman over here.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the inputs. My name is Chris White, Executive Director of the African Circular Economy Network. There's always the same talk, and we're always talking about the same systems and the same extractive components. In Africa, we are blessed with an abundance of resources that nobody's looking at the moment, which don't require us to extract them. These are sitting in our waste streams at the moment, and I'm not talking about e-waste. I'm talking about our mine tailings. I'm talking about the rare earth metals that are stuck in our fly ash deposits and all the rest of it. I mean, latest calculation, we've had about $466 billion worth of rare earth metals just in 15 of our fly ash tailings in South Africa alone. We have the technologies, the systems, the know-how to pull these things up. We need to look at the opportunity in terms of driving that system forward. And Kgauta mentioned also before about the issue around we're not recycling, what are we doing about recycling the solar panels and the batteries? There's a lot of technology and things that are happening around that. Why are we not pushing and promoting that, getting these things to scale? So we're looking at again, from an extractive perspective, whereas what we should be doing is looking back and saying, hang on a second, we've got a lot of technology, a lot of know-how, a lot of resources that we're not extracting and getting the benefit from in Africa. And I'd love to see some benefit going towards that. I don't know who to direct that question to, but I think we need to look sometimes outside of the box to look at the opportunities that are right in front of us.
Thank you. I'll allocate that question to Eddy, just given the work that he's doing and how he can contextualize it between vis-a-vis the extraction. Okay, there's somebody here. There's a gentleman here. But since you're already there, please, the lady. We have had two gentlemen already, so I'll give preference to the lady.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for a very insightful and informative panel discussion. I'm not sure whether I have a question or a comment. My name is Nobantu Mtimde. I'm all the way from South Africa. And what I'm interested in, perhaps I will direct it to you, Davinah, is the process of economic transformation and or economic regeneration. Because I think before we get to how are we going to fund an Eddy and to the power of 5, I think there needs to be a socio-political, economical convergence, a conversation that needs to happen at a much higher level with regard to the financial flows of resources within the economy or within the African economy and within the global economy. Because if that conversation hasn't happened, it doesn't matter how many bank statements Eddy will submit. It's still not going to make financial sense, number one. It's still possibly not going to be bankable, number 2. And number 3, it's not going to make the desired impact at the most basic social economic levels, which is where we need change. I was having a conversation with someone, and it's great. We're talking about e-waste, we're talking about plastics. There's all sorts of pacts and bans and things that are going on. But what I actually noticed is that if you look at waste resources, waste resources, one particular element with a specific composition that does not change, changes in value depending on whose hands it's in. Downstream and upstream. Now, if we're going to talk about equitable access and economic transformation, we need to have a conversation of what is the value of lithium downstream and upstream, and who are the beneficiaries of that value downstream and upstream, and how are we going to create equity and start to bridge that gap. And for me, that is a conversation that is not about batteries. Before we start to talk about batteries, let's leave the batteries and talk about the value of minerals downstream, upstream, and the actors that need to be in the room to start to create meaningful impact and equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bertrand, I'm going to give you 45 seconds because we're running out of time to ask your question. Is that not on?
No, it is. Thanks. So I'll try to be brief. But basically, I wanted to piggyback on the last comments that Davinah made. So for everyone, my name is Bertrand Asamoah. I'm an associate partner with Dalberg, based in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. And we have worked closely with the bank and other organizations around the circular economy space. But I think the point you raised around the fact that there's a lot of funds available, but they're not reaching the needs at the grassroots level is a critical one. And one word that I think not enough energy and attention is being given to, because to me that's a critical lever for us to move the needle on enabling the many innovative and potentially impactful high potential businesses in the circular and climate space on the continent. You mentioned a few examples that are led by the bank, including the African Investment Forum Marketplace and the new facility that you're establishing for green finance. Can you or other members of the panel tell us a bit more about your experiences or your perspectives on how we can actually identify those mechanisms that can allow us to reach the needs at the grassroots level, ideally at a high scale, at as large a scale as possible, in order to actually make this movement a broader effort and hopefully as impactful as possible? Thank you.
Thank you. I know we are running out of time, so if I could invite, starting from my right, Davinah, to respond to questions directed at you, and perhaps, and I'm going to be rather strict in time, if you're able to do it in 60 seconds or thereabouts, it would be great.
All right. So very quickly, how do we get the downstream involved?
Yeah.
I think Kgauta mentioned something about municipalities getting involved. It is ultimately a governance issue. And oftentimes when we have this conversation, leadership has never been a stock. But leadership is a stock that actually should be traded. Because until we have strong leadership on the continent in terms of how to get this bottom of the pyramid involved in this, it will always be a cycle. It will be this, it's Russia, it's France, it's the usual, China. But the failure is on the leadership, because there is no reason whether, at whatever value we put it, they have to be on the table. South Africa has a good word called Indaba. I think it is a forum. And so we need to localize even these terms so that the bottom of the pyramid understands what circular economy is, what critical minerals are. It will fly off. Nobody knows what cobalt does in the region where they're mining it. And so it's important that the valuing of these resources at the community level, it really, if we are talking about transformation, it cannot only come from upstream. So the issue, the next one there.
Yes, how do the funds get to?
Yeah, so first of all, there has to be, I mentioned the deal marketplace. It's very critical that we have projects last year, because again, when there's demand, these get created. There was demand and the whole, let's change the infrastructure of the financial, the financial institutions. That is grassroots demand. I would wish to see an African Union conference discuss these issues. that we have, how do these critical minerals get distributed, whatever definitions, at an African Union. So that when we have an African Union in January or in July, there's certain deals that we know were signed at the African Union. That would make sense. That would pique the interest. That would get him there because he'll know that he's getting his deal in.
Okay.
Thanks.
Be able to publicize a lot of what's already happening as a way to stimulate the pipeline. Eddy.
Yes, thank you. I just want to add something
Yeah.
to what has been said. Talking specifically about our project, and I think it will address the point of Madame. When you look at, for example, the Buenassa project, what is the vision behind? It's simply to have a Congolese-based initiative trying to work on the vertical integrations of the value chain for specific critical minerals. In our case, cobalt is the first target, but because in the DRC, to get cobalt, most of the time you need to take it out of copper, we take the two, okay? In the DRC, there is no Congolese trader. All traders are global companies like Glencore, Trafigura, and many others. They take most of the value. All the mining operations in the DRC, they are controlled by foreign interests, mostly Chinese. Okay? The idea was simply to say, it needs to stop. There is nothing wrong having foreign investment in the country, but Congolese need now to enter into the field and play with foreign companies. How it's happened, to put it simply, we look at the environment, we went to see the leadership of the country, and we just said, look, we have ideas, we have a brain, we have a heart because we love our country, and we want to change the narrative. We got one question. I'm telling a small story, but I think it can be interesting. And when I told leadership, it was the president of the country, Mr. Tshisekedi. And he said, local mineral beneficiation is key. What do you need? And we said, we need funding. We went all over the place. We went through very heavy and complex processes. It takes too much time. And the gentleman told us, you'll go to the Industrial Promotion Fund, which is a government entity, and they will fund your project, at least for the first steps. What was the first step? What is the first step? Is putting together or to fund a project preparation facility. Probably $30 million. First range, $3.5 million. And we signed an agreement. Based on that, we commissioned a finance advisory firm, a US finance advisory firm called Delphos, who look at our project and decide to assist us to raise the money. And what's the difference? Most of the time we think that the government will be the one helping us and do a lot of things for us. No, I think a good project is a project that stands on its own. It must be a project that responds to a need on the market. And in this case, the Buenassa project simply makes sense for most of the people who are listening to us. Why? 70% of the cobalt production comes from the DRC. On the geostrategic point of view, the West is trying to, not to decouple, but to reduce its reliance on China, on critical minerals. And that's where we come and saying, look, we don't want to put together an initiative against China, but we want to be in a position to serve both China on one side and the US and its ally on the other side, meaning EU, Japan, South Korea, and so on. They have clear needs. We need $500 million to put our project together. What's the plan? Quite simple. To look offtake agreement, secure feedstock. The government can help us with that, and they say they will do so that you have financial viability with your project. And even if governmental entities take time, on the private market, you can raise the money. And we just decide to work on a model where we will become trader of critical minerals, in this case, copper and cobalt. But in order to do that, we wanted to refine our product locally. so that the product do not go out of the country as raw material. Of course, we don't have the capacity to absorb all the production of the DRC. We're starting with 5,000 tons of cobalt, 30,000 tons of copper, but at least by phase, we can increase our capacity to process the minerals. By doing so, you can attract directly the attention of downstream players, automotive industries, electronic industries, military industries, and those companies, they have billions of dollars available simply to buy the product. And instead of keeping intermediary in the systems, we just skip them so that they can trade directly with us. Yeah. And we always saying is that you need cobalt from the DRC, you come to the DRC. That's the model. And I think it's simply a way to show that is it possible to develop way of getting access to finance. Of course, by developing a product in the DRC, having local community and the national community in mind, the national economy in mind, will impact positively the populations. And with the support, financial and technical, of foreign partners, you can build strong, smart, and fruitful partnership that will benefit through the Global South, if you consider us as a representative of the Global South, and some industrial players that we call today downstream players, who will find an interest to invest in some initiative at upstream level so that most of the downstream can be done progressively where the minerals are coming from. It will shorten the supply chain, it will reduce the emission of carbons, and it will lead us in a path to a greener economy. That's one of the routes. Yeah. And just quickly to the question of the tailing, I think it's a matter of mastering the technology to do that, investing enough. When you talk, for example, about batteries, we probably don't have enough batteries on the market so that we can recycle them and gain the economical viability. It will come over time. It will take some time, but that's where the partnership that I mentioned, technology partnership, will help us to use efficiently the resources available, and at the end, making sure that they're not only used in industrialized part of the world, but that start getting used as well in a developing country where the minerals are coming from. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Eddy, and I can't wait for when we'll be back in such a setting to hear we already did it, you know. Elisa, if you could just quickly address the question on e-waste and how all of these options, you know, all need to be a consideration. I know we are out of time, but I couldn't
I'll just use one word, I promise.
Okay.
Because actually the question on e-waste is not terribly different from the question around remining and reuse in mine tailing. And there's one ingredient in the conversation that I think we should put clearly on the table, that our macroeconomic system, our system of incentives, our fiscal policies, the way in which budgets are being allocated, is today actually fueling a linear system. So until when we change those and we make those waste really be treasure and resources because there's an economic value in using them, it will be very, very difficult to move from the pioneering situations where we have companies leading by example to really having followers of those leaders that transform fully the economy. So we really need to crack this element of really transforming the way in which the economy's incentives are being shaped, to make sure that, you know, when you have an e-waste, there will be people running at it because it is really a resource and it makes economic sense for this to be returned into the economy.
Systems change to enable that we can achieve this, and also making sure that the incentives are aligned the right way. I don't have enough time to summarize all of the content that has been generated out of this, but I hope that you have come out with either something that is food for thought, something to challenge you, something that you would like to even want to find out some more, go research a little bit more. But I think at the core of it is in the understanding of there is an opportunity here. There is work to be done to make sure that as opposed to one-off projects, as opposed to one Eddy, we can be able to talk of an organizing principle that enables us to realize this at a scale that is unprecedented, at a scale that is so transformative for the economies of these countries, and that can provide the level of drive and incentive to want to keep doing it. Thank you all so very much for joining this panel discussion, and a round of applause for my panelists. Looking forward that this is not the end of this conversation. This is just a pause that can continue on, obviously, in the one-on-one and the networking. Thank you so much. Thank you.